All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Open Mainframe Education Project Student User Group. Uh, my name is Devonte Hawkins, and today I'm joined by a great panel of, um, of speakers today. Just a friendly reminder, this session is being recorded, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Today, we have a great guest speaker for you all today. Today, we have Adia Sakura-Lemessy joining us today. So, Adia, say hello to everyone and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on. Do you want me to get into a brief introduction? Or you want to save it for the slideshow?
Sure. Quick, brief introduction about yourself. Go ahead.
Sure. I am a client services consultant at Broadcom. I'm also a recent graduate of Albany State University. I majored in computer science, graduated in fall of 2023. And so I'm pretty new to mainframe, but I'm very excited to be here. I think it's a great space to work in.
Okay, great, awesome. So, go ahead and getting started with the questions. First thing that I love to ask any mainframer that I come across is briefly, speak about your past experience before getting into mainframes. It's sort of like your origin story, right? Could you talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. So I have a bit of a long origin story before I really got into mainframes because even getting into computer science to start with, I did major in computer science, but that wasn't really where I started. At one point in college, I thought that I wanted to do biology, actually. I was considering maybe going into medicine. Ultimately, I decided that wasn't for me after I did some research into the subject area. So I became a computer science major in junior year of college, but mainframes were not high on my radar at that point in time either. And I'll get into this as I talk about really how I got into mainframes specifically. But the short of it was that I didn't really know much about mainframes until really like senior year of college. So a lot of my experience up to that point was in other subject areas. Like I was working in cybersecurity, doing research in those kinds of subject areas, but my actual career experience really started with mainframes through an internship during my senior year. Prior to that, it was really just research and I was tutoring, but I hadn't really tried going into the career field with anything else because I actually wanted to go straight back to school after I finished my undergrad. Mainframe was what changed my mind about that, to be honest. So really my experience before I got to Broadcom as a technical consultant, I was part of Broadcom's Vitality program for about 6 or 7 months, which is really a training apprenticeship where I also kind of specialized in security concepts. And prior to that, uh, I did an internship, a mainframe modernization internship within Sono. So those are really my introduction to mainframe and where I kind of got my prior experience.
All right, awesome. And follow up to that question is, how did you get interested into going into tech?
Sure. So, really, what got me interested in tech was more of a lifelong interest. I always knew that I liked computer science to some extent. I got into a lot of it through, video games as well. I was really interested in the history and the background of all of that. But I didn't actually decide that computer science is what I wanted to do with my career until junior year of college, because really, I was part of that group that started college in 2019. That was my freshman year. So, of course, spring of 2020, second semester, we have the spring break that never ended, where we all went home and did not go back to campus for a while. And during that period, I was trying to decide what I wanted to major in because I was actually a general studies major prior to that. And when I was at home hearing about all of these cyber attacks that were happening in all sorts of industries across the country and across the world, because a lot of the infrastructure didn't plan for everybody to be working remotely. this was a big change. There was a lot of high stress. A lot of people were falling for phishing scams. A lot of holes were being left open. And as I'm hearing about all this on the news, that was when I think I really decided, I think I want to do cybersecurity. And that's really how I decided to go into computer science. And once I got into my actual core classes in junior year, I knew that I'd made the right choice. It just felt like a good fit for me.
Yeah, I love it. And cybersecurity is also important, especially now these days. So it's definitely good to see how, just looking at stuff like the news can really spark an interest in joining the tech field. So that's really great to hear. Now, you said that, you completed an internship in mainframes, but what really was that sort of push that really got you into this space, and what really convinced you that mainframe was a great place to be and to stay?
Sure. And I really do like telling this story because what, like I was kind of alluding to before, sure, my introduction to mainframe happened like in junior year when I started, which is actually unusual, right? A lot of schools these days don't really mention that mainframe is still a viable option or sometimes even an option at all. So when I heard about it, that was unusual to actually know that it was around, but I still wasn't particularly interested at first. I was like, okay, sure, mainframes are around. I think they run your credit card transactions, but I don't think I really want to do that. We had a pretty good presence of mainframe in our computer science department through IBM Z ambassadors, encouraging people to do the Z Explore, get your badges, but I kind of shrugged a lot of that off until senior year because in spring break, it's over spring break of my senior year of college, which really I was a fall graduate, so this was like the spring before I graduated in 23. Uh, Cher was coming to Atlanta, and I was going to school in Southwest Georgia, so this was actually pretty close to home. And one of our professors decided to take a group of students. But actually, Vontae is hearing me tell the story. We went to school together. He was also part of this trip himself. But uh, they, one of our professors decided to take a group of students to share because students get into share for free. So all he had to do really was arrange with the school to get us our transport and our hotel for the week, and we were set. And at first, I didn't really want to go, but I didn't have anything going on for spring break. And I was like, well, sure, it's a mainframe conference, but I guess it can't hurt at that point. I'm still mostly thinking, I don't know if a conference has anything it can offer me, this kind of conference, because I was still thinking probably going to go to grad school. Don't know if I want to do mainframe until I actually got there. And once I actually started talking to the mainframe community, I realized now going from the abstract to the concrete, how many people had had such long and fulfilling careers in mainframe, the passion that they spoke about it with, the fact that this was like real and it had been going on in the background, these people who were working on, the computers that are like the backbone of a lot of our modern society, and I just didn't know about them. And I was really drawn in. Even though I knew very little about the actual technology involved, I knew that I wanted to be around this community. It made me feel more like an individual person, I think, as opposed to a lot of other sectors of computer science, which may be more heavily saturated in such a way that it can be easier to feel like you're a collection of keywords on your resume. In mainframe, I felt like a person. And so that was the first thing that convinced me that I was interested. And through Share, I actually networked with the people at Ensono who kind of later would encourage me to join their internship program. And once I was accepted and began working on the system itself, looking at the 3270 emulators, uh, I was a little spooked at first, but I found that I really did enjoy it. So those two things together was what made me decide this is what I want to do with my career.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, you're right. I was there actually with you, so I kind of got to see it unfold live and in person, and it really was something special because not a lot of young people know that the mainframe exists every day in the background, right? So actually getting to go to a conference like Share, which we will talk about later a little bit is that it really does open your eyes, and you actually get to talk to people that have been in this space for 20 plus years, and they always have that smile on their face when they're talking about what they do on the road, because it's just a great space to be in. And I know at the end there you kind of touched on our next question is, how did you apply what you learned in school to actually land your first internship in mainframes, right? Were there any things that you learned in school that also applied in the mainframe space?
Sure. There is actually in the kind of direct technical sense. I think a lot of people kind of going into mainframe now, like us, right, kind of fresh out of school now, may not realize that you can use some of these skills you learned in the distributed space directly in mainframe. Because my internship opportunity, that introduction to mainframe for me, was when I say it was mainframe modernization, I mostly wrote Python, actually. I wrote Python in VS Code using Zoe. So that looked like a development environment that I was already pretty familiar with. And even though at Albany State we did Java as our main programming core, Java is also a language that could be used on the mainframe in a very similar way. So there was sort of the direct application where before that, I would have assumed that I needed an entirely new skill set and, I was going to have to learn completely new programming languages and completely new interfaces to actually do the work. But it can be a little bit more of a middle ground, depending on what your entry point is and what kind of work that you're doing. There can be a spot where you might be able to use development environments that you were actually learning in your standard classes in computer science core. And then on the non-strictly technical side, I will say that a lot of what I think is important to learning about mainframe and kind of thriving in a mainframe opportunity is a willingness to learn and to not and a lack of fear when it comes to asking questions. It can be kind of nerve-wracking to see how much information is presented to you. And if you feel like you really need to know all of it, that might kind of cause a bit of the imposter syndrome where you feel like I don't really want to ask because they kind of seem like they already know all this stuff. But mainframe is vast. Like when you come in as a new person to mainframe, whether that is because this is your first career path or you're transitioning to this career path after working in distributed or maybe even non-technical fields, because I know several mainframers now who didn't necessarily major in computer science, you're coming up against people who have been here sometimes for 30, 40, 50 years. So they didn't learn all that stuff overnight. There was a point when they didn't know much more than you do when you go in for the first time. So, those skills you kind of learn in school about learning how to learn, which is some of the soft stuff that you learn in college that you might not think about, learning how to learn, how to ask those questions, how to speak up and work with the people around you. It might be easier for some personalities at first than others, but it is really important. And that definitely helped me a lot, just kind of having the confidence to reach out and say, like, okay, I do need some more help. Help me figure out what direction I need to take next.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I love that you said that mainframe. There's a middle ground, right? Because a lot of people, when they hear the word mainframe, they think, oh, well, that's outdated. I have to learn COBOL and Rex, and my professors aren't teaching them at university. But we have programming, well, modern programming languages like Python, like Java, like Go, where that you can utilize on the mainframe, and it's starting to become more modern. I think that that's the thing that will really gravitate more people graduating college, is that like, oh, well, you could take a programming language that you learned in school or on your own and actually apply it into this space. So I love that. And the second thing is that is
Right.
I agree with you. You have to be open to learning new things, right? And even though it may not be something that you never that you're necessarily used to, don't be afraid to reach out, ask tons of questions, because the SMEs, the experts, they're there for a reason. They're there to help and guide and mentor you. So it really is, you really do have to find that sweet spot of like, okay, I'm open to trying new things, but then also there are going to be times where I don't know what I'm doing and I have to ask for help, and being able to take that guidance that you're given and be able to apply it right in your everyday role. So I'm really glad that you touched on those two key areas. And The next question is, during your internship, you obviously learned a lot. So, how did you build those skills up from day one of your internship to now, you know, working in this space full time now?
Yeah, so I will admit that my path to mainframe may have had a bit more of a traditional educational structure than that of some other people who were coming in, because I did get some of that did happen at that first internship with Insana, as I was mentioning before, because that was really my first mainframe opportunity, but also because I was part of the Vitality program, and that apprenticeship is laid out in such a way that it is specifically about learning. So kind of going in with the structure of an apprenticeship can make that easier. I will admit to that when I talk about how I build my skills. But that being said, a lot of I think what helps with being able to build mainframe skills is really just getting to get your hands dirty. Now, that can be a little bit more difficult if you are trying to feel out whether or not you want to go into mainframe. But before I was offered the opportunity, to work more directly with systems as I was doing my internship and as I was going to the apprenticeship and now through my day job, you can get some of that through opportunities like Z Explorer, where you can kind of go in and actually work with the system a little bit because mainframe really, with all aspects of computer science, I think most of them are very applied, and mainframe is certainly no exception. Building up a lot of your skill set hands-on is very helpful, but if you can't do that, or you're not able to do that quite to the extent that you would like, then I would recommend also see if you can reach out to people in the community, look at resources like what the Open Mainframe Project offers, because there's a lot of people in the space, I think, that are very willing and open to help and provide guidance. And you can learn a lot just by talking and picking someone's brain, whether that be at Share or talking to coworkers. Really, you learn all kinds of information, even if you don't know exactly what questions you need to ask. That's another thing I would say is don't be afraid to have conversations, even if you don't know exactly what you're looking to get from them yet, because you can learn a lot just by doing that. So that's kind of the advice I would give, like if I was telling someone, about building mainframe skills, because that's a lot of what I kind of do myself outside of just the reading, doing badges and inner skill, and practicing on my test systems. A lot of what I also do that theoretically everyone should be able to do is really just talk and see what resources you can find that are available to you to kind of put that into perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I definitely do agree with you. You definitely learn a lot from people just by having a conversation or just by reaching out, right? I try to make a daily habit of reaching out to a new person, possibly if not every month, then every 2 months, right? Just to have a conversation, definitely learn more about them. So, you definitely have to, step outside your comfort zone with that, but you never know, what information or what opportunities you can unlock from just talking to people, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So, I don't see any questions in the chat right now, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A and we'll be sure that we answer them. But I'm not gonna pass it over to Taylor. Taylor,
I actually have a few questions myself,
Sure
so
thing.
I
good.
will be asking questions. If anybody has questions that you are curious about, please post them, because we really appreciate the different perspectives and ideas of the attendees. So we'd greatly appreciate questions because you might be thinking about it, but you might not realize a couple other people are too. So feel free to ask away and but in the meantime, I have a question about your research. We kind of
Sure.
skipped over some of the research, but if I recall, it's a little non-standard. I think you started off doing research with some flies in Central America, and then you ended up doing computer vision with some NASA projects. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did have a feeling you were going to ask about that, and I'm happy to talk about it because I think maybe giving some perspective on the way that I did sort of move through several things before I got to mainframe, maybe that's sort of reassuring. So, as Taylor was saying, really I started And I mentioned this too, that I started college as general studies. I did not know for sure what I wanted to do yet, but I was considering biology. And so the first research project that I did was my during my freshman year, yeah, over that 2019, 2020 semesters, I did research with it was about like synthesizing the fungal communities of like the love bugs we had in southwestern Georgia so that we could like see the difference between like the fungal communities of like male and female love bugs. It was very different, obviously, than what it is that I do now. And doing research in biology also functions pretty differently than some of the research I would do later in computer science, because a lot of that was in the lab. We're like swabbing things. We're trying to grow like fungal colonies. We're sending things off to labs and waiting to get our results back. So it was a decent amount of waiting in between things. And I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity to do that. It was a cool experience, but I did kind of suspect that experience doing research in that field, as well as my experience in my coursework, kind of suggested to me that biology wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do with my career, because I didn't find myself deeply passionate about it in the same way that I feel about computer science. But that is really where I started, kind of figuring out my educational path. And then the next time that I got involved in research was after I joined the computer science department. Albany State University has some grants from NASA to do some research regarding developing machine learning algorithms for rovers to do crater detection. So really, this was pretty high level stuff in my opinion, but I got the opportunity to get involved in that project, and it taught me a lot more about both Martian topology and machine learning than I really expected to learn. We're doing Python and TensorFlow, and a lot of it is, I'm not even really sure that I could explain it concisely in such a way that would be relevant to everyone, but I will say that it was very exciting. I later got the chance to present some of that research at a conference with NASA. So I learned a lot from that for sure. And it was kind of cool getting some of the machine learning right before the big AI boom of 2022, because I started working on that project in 2021. So that became a big buzzword very soon after we started that. And the research project that I did that was kind of the most, it might seem the most distinctly relevant with my degree, because really I did computer science with a concentration in information assurance. So I did do cybersecurity core classes as part of my major, was some research that I did with Carnegie Mellon between my junior and senior year, which was in data privacy and a little bit of user experience too, because really what we were studying was cookie consent notices. Those banners you get at the bottom of your screen telling you like this website uses cookies, and sometimes there's just an OK button, or there might be a button to like set your preferences. Well, we were doing research on whether or not people understood what those meant and were able to make informed choices about their privacy, especially the difference between what American consumers thought of that compared to people who are in the UK, because the data privacy laws differ. The UK has GDPR, and the US doesn't necessarily have one body of laws that's equivalent to that. And what was interesting about that project was that since it was human interactions research, a lot of what I did was not strictly technical. It was actually conducting surveys and synthesizing the data, the survey results that we got back. And I was super passionate about the idea of what we were working on. Um, but I didn't necessarily love doing a lot of the data synthesis as much as I thought that I would. I thought that I would prefer to do something more technical. So that experience was valuable to me in terms of also kind of giving me an idea of what I thought I wanted to do after undergrad, because I had been strongly considering graduate school. And if I wanted to do research, did I want to do research like that? Or did I want to get my hands a little bit dirtier, which is ultimately what I do now, working in mainframe, is definitely a lot of like, I do get a decent amount of client interaction and talking to people, but I get a lot of hands-on, getting dirty with it too, in terms of actually, you know, working on the system and actually implementing new software, things like that, a lot of the technical aspects.
So on the topic of security, currently you are, I believe, what, ACF2, technical consultant specifically. So what was
Yes.
your draw to security? Because it seems like earlier in your career you always kind of had this fascination with it. What was your draw to security broadly, and then more specifically, how did that play into your mainframe career?
Yeah, so really my interest in security, I will say, began first as my interest in my own privacy.
Okay.
Like like I always kind of going through as I started to get a little bit older, kind of by later in high school and going into college, I saw how the world has become increasingly connected. And personally, I've always been someone who has liked to have a decent amount of control over my data. I'm kind of a little bit of a private person. I also am someone with a very unique name, so that was another thing that kind of mattered a lot to
Hmm.
me, was that when you look me up, I'm really the top result. That's just the truth of it. So I cared a lot about how my data was going. But it was seeing how much data services actually require a lot of the time, both optional data and required data. I started to become a little bit uncomfortable kind of seeing the number of data breaches that were happening. I think maybe most people, if not all of us, have probably received at least one notice of a data breach. I've gotten more than one. Usually it's from services that you think you should be able to trust, like it will be financial institutions or medical institutions, businesses that you feel that you should be able to entrust with your data, but it can be very difficult to actually secure that data these days. So my interest in cybersecurity really started from that. And as I said, kind of grew more as we were inside with the pandemic and it became even more directly relevant. And so that's really what kind of encouraged me to pursue that in college. And I did know ultimately that my interest always leaned towards security and that I was probably going to work in security once I entered my career. So going into mainframe, I felt pretty similarly. I was open to the idea of potentially kind of having a focus in a different subject area, but I knew that security was kind of top of the list for me, close to my heart in terms of what I wanted to do. So that's really why when I was part of the Vitality program and I had the opportunity kind of to present sort of what I was most interested in doing, I said that I was most interested in doing security. And so from there, I got into doing my training in ACF2 and kind of progressed from there. But I will say that kind of in all aspects of my life, I am fascinated by cybersecurity and very interested in trying to be on the cutting edge of that.
Awesome. So kind of on the topic of growing to serve, I'd love to hear some advice you have to the attendees on careers in cybersecurity in the mainframe or maybe outside of the mainframe, if you have any kind of input. I know it's always
Hmm.
been a hot field, but I've heard that it is kind of challenging to get into it in certain aspects as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It can be kind of difficult to figure out where to start, especially because I think that cybersecurity is both very technical in a lot of ways, but also involves a lot more of understanding people than I think it seems on the surface. Because in most instances, really, people tend to be the weakest links in a cybersecurity system. So you'll often find that a lot of what you're actually studying and trying to work against is people. Like you're trying to create things that uh, you're trying to protect people against things like social engineering attacks, and you're trying to figure out, like, say, with a lot of cybersecurity is doing penetration testing, where you're trying to think like the bad guys to figure out what kind of vulnerabilities they're going to exploit, right? It's a little different than some of the other, say, if you're doing like development, a lot of what you feel like you might be studying is really just how do I code and how do I code effectively? And cybersecurity is a little bit different than that. So if someone's trying to get into cybersecurity, probably the most straightforward way of doing it, especially if you're like not doing that as your major in college, or you're not in school right now and you did something else, would probably be to look towards like either what resources are available to you in terms of sometimes you can access like websites like Hack the Box that will allow you to actually test some of these cybersecurity principles, do some little penetration testing in like sandbox environments, or potentially trying to get into like cybersecurity training. There are training programs available that are out there. Some of them are low cost, are some of them will actually pay as well, and those will give more of a structured introduction and might help you work towards things like getting certifications because especially if you want to work, I think, in the distributed side, a lot of those cybersecurity certifications can make a big difference in setting you up to start your career there. Things like, I want to say it correctly, what is it? CISSP, I think it is. There's an introductory certification.
CISSP. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
That's kind of the first barrier to entry, I think, for a lot of people trying to do cybersecurity in the distributed side. I would say if you're in mainframes, that will help you. It will still be beneficial. Some jobs will also offer, they'll help you with the funding for getting those certifications because they are still helpful, but they might not be as necessary, especially depending on what you want to do kind of in mainframe cybersecurity. Uh, you might not need a certification like that if you can get trained on the actual software, like the external security managers, like your ACF2, Top Secret, RACF. You can do that kind of administration without needing to be certified necessarily.
Now, this might be a bit off topic, and I don't know for sure, but IBM Z Explorer is a great source of training and badges and certifications. I don't know, this might be a hard question to answer, but was there any RACF training in there that anybody on the panel knows about? Or because I'm
Hmm.
trying to think of the resources available generally to students and people who are interested, and there can be a little bit of a barrier initially for finding resources on that. But I was trying to think of like, was there RACF training that was available through IBM? So
You're right. There is a bit of a barrier to entry to that sometimes. I can't say from off the top of my head whether or not there was RACF or there are RACF courses available in IBM Z Explorer, but I will say that from my experience, Interskill is usually
yes.
available to students. Darren Search is
Oh,
often he often mentions this. If you talk to him about this, he will mention it at events and at Share that usually InterSkill will be available to college students. And that will give them access to a lot of the badge courses there, which should include RACF as well.
yeah. So for
So
the
that would probably,
folks on the call, I don't know if Devante or you should be talking about what RACF is and Top Secret and ACF2, but those are all essentially the security software for the mainframe itself. I'm sure many,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so there was at one point where IBM Z Explorer kind of had like a cybersecurity week while they were transitioning from one data center to another data center. So they kind of had to create content to kind of fulfill that time frame. And there was a period where they did have cybersecurity um, material on there. I do know that there was some RACF topics thrown in there, and then I could probably find it and paste it here in the chat. But there is something that that's called. There's like a group of cybersecurity SMEs. I think it's called the IBM Z Enterprise Knights of Z. I happened to talk to one of them at Share Atlanta, and they kind of had like a cybersecurity game that you could play. But
It's
yeah,
fun.
yeah, but there definitely are resources out there. You probably just have to do a quick search to find it, and as Adia said, there are plenty of security courses also available on your skill as well. So I would say that that's probably my number one resource would be Interscale, and then number two, just probably doing a quick Google search, and you could probably find some stuff either on IBM Z, or either on the IBM Z Linux One community sites, or either probably some stuff on IBM documentation as well. And then and then also I'm pretty sure Broadcom probably has some information about ACF2 as well. So
ACF2 and top secret, but that we don't have that as necessarily public content. I think you have to be a customer to access some of that, but Interskill has some of the training on, I believe, top secret and ACF2 available. But again, you'd have to get it and check me on that. But yeah, those are great resources to utilize, and I'm sure having a badge for RACF or ATF2 on your resume would kind of be a great discussion point for a cybersecurity role, especially at, banks and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you, I agree. And I do know that a lot of the more, I guess, like general non product specific kind of cybersecurity courses, I do know that you can access some of those through Explore. I think IBM has some of those as well that are available on kind of general cybersecurity principles and concepts that should be available. Some of them I think are open to everyone, and some are open to students. So for people who are currently enrolled in college, there are more resources available sometimes than it seems on the surface, but you may have to ask your college about it or reach out to the website or the service and ask them if they have free badges or other training resources available for students, but many services do.
So for my next question, it's two parts. One, it's some question and answer for the group. If y'all are in college or kind of early or like a different part of your career, it'd be great to kind of use that as an example for like put like positioning that as like, a way to get into security or like using kind of your experience or where you're at right now. So if you have anything that you want to post and kind of get input from Adia and the panel on like security career like specifically, more than happy to do that. And I kind of threw Adia on the um to do that, but I think there's a great amount of experience that she has that would be useful for you maybe if you're interested in cybersecurity. So if you post a question, maybe we can help out a little bit and seeing what kind of directions would be available for you or some advice. But on that topic, Adia, like let's imagine that like, you're fresh out of college and you're talking to yourself. I don't want to make it too confusing, but right now in your current role, you're interacting with a lot of customers with cybersecurity, specifically on the mainframe. First off, like what are those customers look like? What type of customers are you interacting with? What would you tell your college grad self? Like these are the customers that are interested in, or these are the type of businesses that are looking for cybersecurity mainframe specifically.
That's a good one. I have to think about that for a second.
No
Um,
problem.
I will say, admittedly, and this is a little bit different than maybe the answer you're expecting.
That's fine.
I didn't really anticipate being in a client-facing role throughout most of my career planning.
Hmm.
So I only realized I might have been interested in doing that maybe about a year ago, and I joined the tech consulting team last August. So pretty close to when I actually entered a client-facing role is when I decided I might have been interested in that. I was really interested in doing like the purely technical stuff. I didn't think
Hmm.
that I wanted to necessarily do a lot of talking to people and talking to clients, but I did change my mind about that because I found that I actually do enjoy it. So I give that as a preface to say kind of that my perspective sort of comes from there as well. It's like this is a little different than I might have thought that I was doing. So I hadn't given
Hmm.
it a whole lot of thought kind of prior to sort of pivoting towards client facing. So I will say that a lot of the clients you're working with, these are big, they are pretty big and important kind of institutions in a lot of sense. You'll have you might have government agencies or financial institutions. Sometimes it might be healthcare, like Mainframe, is in a lot of these very kind of industries that deal with a lot of data and a lot of very important data that needs to be well protected. So, of course, they need to have a lot of effort put towards making sure they are compliant with cybersecurity regulations and that they have everything secured protect their to protect their customers and their business. So I I do find it very fascinating a lot of the times, admittedly, too, to kind of see and talk and see how all, and this is a little bit more general too, but in mainframe, you see that a lot of the clients, every client site kind of has things laid out a little bit differently, and you can learn a lot of small things, sort of seeing how they might use the same tools that are available to them, but in a slightly different way, with different setups and layouts. So it is in some ways just as vast as I thought it was going to be, and in other ways still vaster.
Got it. So let me step back a bit and go in a little bit more into the laid out questions for a second. Actually, there is one more question. I am a little curious. Where do you think the future of security is going, um, in general and with the mainframe? And then we'll go back into the laid out questions.
Hmm. I think that a lot of, and this is, of course, something that we're hearing about all the time. The big buzzword is AI. But I do think that AI is going to have a role in cybersecurity in terms of uh, potentially not just changing the way that security, like that we do the monitoring to like detect cyber attacks, but also, of course, for the cyber attackers who now have potentially more tools available to them to launch better crafted and more complex sorts of cyber attacks. So I think in general, all of cybersecurity is going to be kind of doing this push and pull with seeing how AI can be used both for good and for pretty nefarious purposes naturally. So that's kind of the thing I'm watching to see how does that evolve because that's something that moves, it's been moving very quickly over like the past 2 or 3 years. And I will say I think it's a bit above my head to really speculate much on if it's going to stay at that pace and what's really going to happen in the next few years. But I think it's fair to say that it's going to be a big player in the game. Um, and sorry, you asked about what I thought was going to be next move in security in general and in mainframe, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, so I think really cybersecurity has always had a pretty solid demand, I would say, and I certainly don't see that changing anytime in the future. If anything, I think we will probably become, I think we'll probably have a little bit more importance over time. As I was kind of alluding to before, there's so much data. And the numbers of the amount of data, the quantity, it's not going down. And the more of that you have out there, the more you have to protect. The more people that are going to want it. You're seeing some of the cyber attacks that are happening right now, they're getting higher profile as we hear about them. It's like, it's a cat and mouse game. So the only way they're really going to keep up with that is that we need cybersecurity professionals working on it.
Good to know. So stepping back a bit, what brought you into the mainframe community? Not necessarily like the mainframe, but I think there's kind of a very strong community around it. So like, how did you get involved with the mainframe community specifically?
Yeah, so I do mention share a lot, but that's because it was kind of a catalyst for a lot of my interaction with the mainframe community. But even kind of shifting away from share itself, why I say that too is because once you start meeting a few people in mainframe, it's not a very, it's a very close knit, but not particularly large community. So you'll actually meet a lot of the same people over and over again as you go through time, incidentally. You'll see a lot of the same people you kind of interact with in various meetings. You'll see on things like if you are involved in, say, uh, there's like some LinkedIn groups that are available for mainframers, and you might have other things like you might watch live streams from people like Tish Talks Tech. You have things like the Open Mainframe Project's live streams. There were other communities as well, like I think it was. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. It might have been Eastern Tennessee State. There was a university that I know has a mainframe group that's available that they have their meetings online. So anyone who's available could join those. And I did participate in a few of those meetings when I was in college, but they have it open for all students that want to join. And so you'll see a lot of familiar faces. Like now, I find that if there's something happening in mainframe, I'll usually recognize at least one or two of the people that's actually working on it, which is actually very exciting, but it makes it a little bit easier because once you start to meet a few mainframers, you'll have a pretty easy time meeting more as long as you're willing to engage with them and see what's going on, and participate in whatever maybe groups or events that are available. And as I was saying, many of these are freely available that anybody can go look at, watch, participate in without needing to do something as perhaps grand as attending share, which might not be accessible to many people because, of course, you have to actually get the chance to go out and travel there. And if you're not in school anymore, then it's also something you need potentially to have your employer allow you to attend due to the cost involved. So really the big thing about getting involved in mainframe is just if you start talking to mainframers, it's pretty easy to find your circle expand. That's what I would say. It's friendlier and easier than it seems on the surface.
So how do you plan on contributing to this community? Or how
Uh,
have you contributed in the past?
well, really, I'm interested in seeing kind of how I can do this sort of I guess this kind of advocacy, right? Like I believe pretty strongly that the mainframe is a great kind of industry for people to enter. And so really a lot of what I want to do is see how we can make that path clearer for people, how we can make it easier, more accessible, and more inviting. Because as inviting as I have found mainframe to be, I fully acknowledge that it can be pretty difficult to break into if you don't know where exactly to start. Like I was able to really benefit from networking. So it's like once I kind of started talking to people and I could reach out to specific people in Mainframe and ask them, hey, do you have any advice on how I can do this or how I can find this opportunity or how to do that? That helped me a lot with kind of establishing my career in Mainframe. But without that network, if you're looking at it from the outside, it can seem, excuse me, it can seem kind of impenetrable and maybe inaccessible since some of the resources, we might not have a lot of readily available resources like what the Open Mainframe Project does or like the Explore. It can be a little harder to find that. So a lot of what I really want to do is help contribute to making those resources more accessible and available, and also potentially just being a resource for people to reach out to if they just want to try to figure out, well, where do I start? How do I do this? Who can I talk to? Because that made a big difference for me. So if I can kind of pay that forward, then I think that would be very good.
I think that's something that's really cool about the mainframe community is there's a lot of attitude around paying it forward and trying to help other people out. And it's very tight knit, and it's great to hear that you want to continue to do that and continue to build that legacy. So definitely eager to see what you do and how you do it. So um,
Thanks.
so
I actually
then
see we Oh, I'm sorry, not to
no,
cut
go
you
for
off.
it.
I just saw we have a question in the chat
Yes,
actually. So
awesome.
someone asked about after exploring various topics, many things, computer science, biology, what do I find most enjoyable about gaining knowledge beyond badges and certifications? Oh, that's a good question. So really, one of the things I think I find most enjoyable about gaining knowledge, a lot of the times, really, I just like hearing people talk about what they do, honestly. Like there's just something really engaging a lot of the time, in my opinion, when I actually get the chance to like interact with somebody in person or on a call in a live setting where I get to ask them questions or hear them talk about something. I just kind of love following their thought process and a lot of times also kind of hearing the kind of excitement that might be behind that as well. Like there is that kind of more abstract sense, right? Not just the feeling of like, oh, okay, I learned a new thing, and learning new things I think is always kind of exciting, but also getting to feel like you have a deeper understanding of kind of of the kind of mindset, right? And the amount of knowledge that is available. So that's kind of, yeah, you asked a kind of a very interesting, thoughtful question. So it's kind of hard to give a really straight, direct answer. But I would say probably that's my favorite thing is when I get to learn from people live and hear them talk and have a bit of connection to go along with the new knowledge that I've gained. So thanks for asking. I
I
think
think
I can, I label that as answer live. That puts it in answered. Do that. Thank you.
awesome. That
Okay.
was a great question. Again, any other questions, feel free to post them. So then on this topic, what would you say to those who are also, considering moving into mainframe or have an interest in it? What would you tell what's one thing you would tell them? And it can be broad or specific, because that's a very,
Hmm.
open-ended question.
See, well, I guess the biggest takeaway that I kind of have about, telling if I was talking to someone who is new to mainframe would be probably that one, don't be try not to be too intimidated by the actual amount of knowledge that is out there. There are a lot of people and programs and opportunities that are available in mainframe, specifically catered to people that might not have a lot of background knowledge. So don't think that just because you don't know much about mainframes, like doesn't mean that you won't be able to learn and actually find a space for yourself in the mainframe. Because there's a lot of people out there who will be willing to answer your questions as long as you feel that you're comfortable enough to ask them. So that would probably be like one of the biggest things is like, don't be too afraid to get in there because it's going to be more open than you think. Now, I'm not going to say that it's easy necessarily. Mainframe can at times be very different than a lot of even what the traditional, so to speak, kind of distributed world might look like when you think about going into tech. It can be pretty difficult, but that doesn't mean you have to feel like you're doing it alone. Like, don't be afraid to reach out to your circle, your community, and don't feel that you won't be able to get there. Yeah, there's a big mountain in front of you, but even the people who are at the top, they didn't start at the top of the mountain. They started on the ground with you. You can get there. You just got to be willing to try.
Mm. There's another question for you from Marcelo. What would be a guidance good to a career transition from Java to mainframe, in parentheses, COBOL? So really moving from uh, working with Java to COBOL.
Hmm, that's a good question. I'm not sure that I'm necessarily the most well versed. I'd like to really give you a great answer for that. I would say in a general sense that, excuse me, have a sip of water here. I would say that I know that right now, there's a decent amount of companies out there that are looking for people to work with both Java and COBOL in terms of there's a lot of like modernization efforts right now where if you were there's some of the COBOL code that exists. There's still people that are needed, of course, to write and support that COBOL code, but there's also a bit of a push now to kind of transition some of that to programming languages like Java. So I do know at the moment there's quite a lot of those careers that kind of touch quite a lot with both. So from that perspective, I see, moving from Java into COBOL has a pretty good basis in mainframe, but I can't really speak too much of the specifics of like what guidance I would give regarding maybe what exactly kind of opportunities you should be seeking out or what kind of uh, you know, training resources you should be looking for. But I see Phil has a also Phil's kind of suggesting to me here. Both Java and COBOL are very important, right? So even when I mention some of this modernization, it's not necessarily about moving from COBOL to Java, like in terms of this linear path of we're getting rid of all the COBOL and moving to Java. Both of them are very important in their own right and respect as well. So
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, I know that especially here at IBM, we are starting to create AI assistants to help kind of modernize that legacy COBOL code into Java code and be able to transform it from COBOL to Java and actually having developers understand what did this COBOL do, what is it now like in Java, and how it interacts with the system overall. So there is a push, and it is being noticed within the space that a lot of COBOL programmers, they're getting ready to retire, and a lot of new people coming in, they don't know COBOL. They mostly know Java, right? So being able to make sure um, that the platform is still being modernized in that front. But to Adia's and Phil's point is that they're still both important. So even if know Java full heartedly, it's also good to learn COBOL as well, just so you can understand the differences between the two, right? So I would say that that's also some good guidance to go forward with that.
Awesome. Yeah, there's an old saying that I heard is why have or when you can have and? Why do COBOL or Java when you can do COBOL and Java, right? Um,
exactly.
so and I think the Open Mainframe project actually I'd have to double check, but I do think there's some courses on COBOL that the Open Mainframe project has put out there. And I think there is some stuff within IBM's Z Explorer on COBOL specific courses as well. So definitely check those out, and doesn't hurt to read up and learn on them by any means. As for careers, that's something that I think in the future I would like the MOE group to start to kind of look into a little bit more. So I'll definitely note that down for COBOL specific careers and take a peek into that actually, because that's a very interesting question. And then back to the last question of do's and don'ts for people new to the mainframe. So what are some things that you should and shouldn't do when you're coming to the mainframe, Adia? Some advice.
I sure. I will say that I think I kind of touched on a lot of that when I was
Yeah.
talking about kind of giving advice to people coming into mainframe. That's what I sort of, was emphasizing like to not be afraid and kind of, get involved and ask questions and try not to be too intimidated by the breadth of what's out there. I think I would mostly, I think that's kind of the main takeaways I would hope someone sort of gets from my advice.
All right. Well, if there's any other questions, please post them. We'll let's see here. Yeah, we'll move on to real quick brief overview of the MOE program. Thank you for all your input, Adia. We're pretty tight on time, so I'll just cover a minute or two on the last slide. But appreciate your input and me and Devonte and I just kind of ask a bunch of questions and get such great responses. And thanks
Yeah,
to the attendees for asking some questions as well.
thank
So
you.
the mainframe open education is basically just exactly what it sounds like, just an open kind of open source idea of just sharing knowledge and ideas surrounding mainframe and just kind of giving you an entry point into the mainframe community. So it's if you get nothing else from it, it's just um, point number one on a long list of points of like kind of of mainframe knowledge. So if you're interested in mainframe, definitely go check out the GitHub. There's a lot of information on there, and we're actually always looking for people to contribute some knowledge there as well. But it's really at the end of the day just the entry point into the mainframe community, the place to start, the place to educate yourself, and the place to continue to grow. So we have a lot of content, a lot of different chapters, including like career paths, roles in mainframe, and just contributing to the MOE. And then we also have some other topics that we discuss on there, but it's all on the GitHub. And Devonte actually is the quote unquote admin for the GitHub. So we are always looking for help for people to join the MOE. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have like, a decade of mainframe experience or anything like that. There's all sorts of ways that you can help out. We love to get input on not just the student user group and the questions, but also on the GitHub as well. For instance, like the question on COBOL is a great question that it would be great to look into, kind of making the GitHub help address what that looks like. I know we have some stuff on COBOL in there, but the career side of the house and the GitHub page definitely is something that we'd like to fill out more in the future. But if you have content suggestions, content development, contribution, or just want to look into badges, this is a great place to start outside of the student user groups. And if there's no other questions on this, I think we're good to close out.
Yeah.
Devonte, do you have any closing statements?
Yes. So just real quick on the Git bug. If you do contribute something, let anyone on the panel know, or any member of the core team of the MOE project. And then also you do get a badge for contributing. So we do have different levels for contributing. So, we would love for everyone to join.
Before we forget, share. You can share this
Yes.
shit. I am so sorry. I was way off topic.
That's okay. And also, we do want to plug Share. Share is going to be happening in Washington, D.C. I believe it's February 23rd through the 27th, and students get to go for free. So please scan this QR code. It will take you to the Share site, and you can go ahead and register for free as a student. And like we talked about in this entire call, Share is really a great opportunity for those new in this space to just get involved and learn more about the mainframe from a community standpoint and also from a technical standpoint. And once again, please be sure to tell your friends about it, scan this QR code, and it does transfer over for each Share conference. So no matter which conference you go to, whether it's going to be the one in February or the one August this year, students can get in for free. So please make sure to spread the word about it, and hopefully we can definitely increase the engagement of students attending Share. Oh, sorry, I didn't know my cursor was over the QR code, but there you go. And of course, if anyone does have any questions on Share, or just needs help registering, please let one of us know, and we'll be sure to point you in the right direction for that. Yeah, I think that's all I have on Share. So thank you once again to everybody. Thank you again, Adia, for agreeing to be our guest speaker for today. As with everything, if anyone has any questions after this call, just please feel free to reach out. Thanks, everyone. Have
Thank
a
you,
great day.
guys.
Thank you. Have a good one.